Welcome to the Daily Exchange, guys. We're here at Consensus 2019 with Jerry, the man himself from IBM. How you going? Welcome to the Daily Exchange.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Now, you've been called, I believe, the godfather of blockchain at IBM. Tell me about that.
Yeah, no, I was early on, probably 2014, I realized that there were several groups in IBM independently pursuing blockchain, so I kind of started bringing them together. We lovingly called ourselves the Chain Gang.
Okay.
And I was the Genesis block on the IBM blockchain, so it kind of helped bring together our initial strategy, and we've grown from there.
Brilliant. Now, your focus right now, and let's talk about it, is around token taxonomy and interoperability. Now, let's break that down for everyone who's watching right now. Firstly, interoperability, what is that?
Yeah, so my focus at IBM and in the industry is building out a blockchain technology that is suitable for enterprise. And so we've been working with Hyperledger, and Hyperledger is a function of the Linux Foundation. They're the gold standard in open source. So we've been building with a set of collaborators this wonderful blockchain foundation called Hyperledger Fabric.
Yes.
And IBM monetizes our generous investment in open source with a platform called the IBM Blockchain Platform. So that's my responsibility. I do not believe, Fred, as much I'm proud of the work we're doing, and as important as I feel it is, there's going to be one chain to rule them all.
Okay.
So in the corner of my mind there, I am thinking ahead of, okay, so if there's not one chain to rule them all, is there a million? Is there some number in between that's suitable? This begs for a future of blockchain of interoperability, right? And blockchains will need to talk to blockchains. So I think as we solve generation one problem, which is just creating a collection of blockchain technologies that are suitable for enterprises, generation two problem is, how do these things work together, right? So always trying to stay at least a step ahead of our consumers.
Yes.
Focused like 90% on the first one, but also now starting to look at it. And there's several aspects to interoperability.
Okay. Now, tell us, do you believe in interoperability? Will it work?
Yeah. So let's break that down a little bit.
Yeah.
So interoperability is a favorite question that a consumer will ask.
Yeah.
And they're asking it for sometimes obvious literal reasons.
Yeah.
Will A work with B?
So let's just practical example, like what's a practical example of interoperability, just for everyone?
Just break it down.
Yeah.
Like, this is, one thing I'm saying is everyone needs to kind of calm down on this topic.
Okay.
That in a sense that it's important.
Yes.
But this is software, and software in 2019, by definition, must work with other software. You may have heard of the API economy. The fun facts from 2016 and 2017 around the mobile application revolution. The average mobile application integrates 12 APIs from different sources. So for example, if you're making a payment in a mobile app, you're interoperating with the PayPal network, perhaps. And then if you want to text someone that the payment has been sent, you're integrating or interacting with the Twilio network. So there you have it. And how does that work? That works through the API economy. Yeah. Blockchains are no different, right? So at one level, if you break it down, there are networks, enterprise blockchain networks that are building consortiums around food safety. For track and trace, they're going to need to interoperate with networks that are working on identity verification. Right? And no different than that mobile example that I gave you. It's a real problem, but it's not a problem of blockchain per se, it's a problem of software. Right? So I think what's top of people's mind is that. But I think deep down inside, if I play psychologist for a second,
yes,
when you hear about interoperability, there's a deeper rooted question or fear. And that is, will A interoperate with B?
Okay.
Because it's a little bit early days on blockchain and enterprise blockchain. And if it turns out A isn't the one, if A is Alta Vista and B is Google for search engines, and I picked A, if A at least interoperates with B, then my investment is kind of preserved. So it's like, it's a little early to jump in the pool The temperature I'm not quite sure about. So if you can help me convince me that the world will work together, if I make a choice that doesn't turn out to be the choice, can you give me some buyer protection, right? So there is this psychological side of interoperability that goes to that.
Okay, so making decisions and not choosing the wrong chain. So is that literally like, can you make make Bitcoin talk to Ethereum and Hyperledger all at the same time? So they can. Is that the idea? Will it work?
At the highest level, of course it'll work, and it's really easy to make it work at one level, which is all of these technologies have APIs and software development kits, SDKs, and there's a notion of a mashup application, which is, a new application, maybe a mobile application that's going to use Bitcoin, Ethereum, and a custom network built with Hyperledger Fabric. Again, that's just API integration.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the 80% integration case to solve. When you break it down more practically, it's less. Those three things that you just mentioned are all enablers of various shapes and sizes. Hyperledger Fabric is not a network. It's a set of tools and services for someone with a great idea, like MediaOcean here in Manhattan, to create a network that allows ad revenue to be tracked. If you're a famous footwear company and you're going to spend $100 million on an ad campaign, you go to an agency, say, hey, spread this money around the board, a little on Facebook, a little on Google, a little on the traditional networks. You don't implement that solution, and it's running live today. So at that level, it becomes less about Hyperledger Fabric and more about the media tracking. Now, if that media tracking want to track money or allow for media ads to be spent in Bitcoin, well, that solution better darn well work with Bitcoin.
Right.
But it doesn't work with Bitcoin. It works with some SDK or wallet provider from Bitcoin, right? So I think the underlying technologies will be completely oblivious to this integration, but it's the APIs and applications running on top that are responsible for bringing these things together where it makes sense.
So I've heard, like, with interoperability, one of the challenges is, say I was going to make a transaction on Ethereum and on Bitcoin as a small example, or let's just say Bitcoin and Hyperledger Fabric, right? At one point in time, I'd need to hold, or I guess custody, the Bitcoin, right? And that potentially could pose a security risk. It's also, I guess, potentially against the, some people say the philosophy of Bitcoin, that you hold your coins all the time and no one else does. Do you think that's going to be the undoing of interoperability?
Yes and no. And I'm rooted. My background is rooted in computer science, although what a lot of folks who've come up in the technical realm have found, especially with blockchain, is that it's forced your business acumen to rise to the surface, and also your economics, like those classes that you took in school. Go back and get the textbooks, and because it's all important. From the scenario, the holding scenario has a deep-rooted problem in computer science of atomic swaps or acid transfers. Back in the day, which is still pretty much running strong today, you have one company using an Oracle database, one company using an IBM database. You have an asset record in the IBM database. You want to move that record over to the Oracle database. You want to make sure that the record doesn't appear twice or disappear completely, right? The double spend problem. Yes. That's been a computer science problem. We have protocols that coordinate a transaction moving from one to the other. There's a technique that you learn in graduate school around two-phase commit, which deeply rooted. It's exactly like someone needs to hold it. You need a transaction manager, like a third party, an escrow system to manage it. So deeply rooted, we have 30 years of computer science to solve this problem technologically of how to move an asset from one side to the other.
So are you saying that the technological problem is easy, but the business side's not possible?
Exactly. Right. It's possible, but you have to work out the rules and regulations.
Right.
And I'm not one to say what they are, because it's going to differ what country you're in, what industry you're in, what are the regulations and rules. So I'm saying from a tech perspective, looking up, it looks like a problem we've seen before and we know how to solve. Okay. From a business problem, good luck.
Okay.
And I'm sorry to say, it's the big old it depends, right? We have seen solutions for this. It's going to, industry to industry, it will be different.
Okay. Now, so you're talking a lot about you have a new token framework. Tell us about that. Like, what's a token framework?
All right. For phase one of enterprise blockchain, people roll their own representation of a digital asset. And it's good. Life is good. Because people are working out in the gym for the day that digital asset in that network might be meaningful outside of that network. But if we have some number of networks, we have a Tower of Babel problem going on, because each independent network has its own representation of the asset. For Horizon 2 or Phase 2 of enterprise blockchain, we need to propose a way across the industry to normalize a digital asset in one network so that it can at least be reasoned with in another network. Thereby kind of shrinking the walls of these as discrete networks and almost creating a network of network.
So what you're proposing is a standard structure for what tokens, or what exactly is the framework?
Yeah. So this is like almost starting with C spot run, because the word token even has different meaning depending on who the beholder is. So the Enterprise Token Initiative that's being sponsored through the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. Marley Gray is one of the chairs who helped sponsor it, and we have people from IBM, R3, many of the industry players around are participating and motivated to come up with an agreed parlance of how we talk about tokens. So it's literally a specification. It's not code yet. Right. It's a specification that talks about what the undeniable facets of a token are, and then what types of classifications are tokens, and tries to come up with a common vocabulary that we're all going to say. It's like almost like in the electronics world, when something is UL listed, it means something. It's been tested a certain way. That this parlance under that.
It's like how all the airlines talk to each other with their tickets.
Exactly.
Okay.
It'll be a common parlance. But then one of the things that we like to do at IBM, we like to think with our code, and we think code rules. So one of the things we're eager to do is, as this taxonomy starts to build out, we want to help represent it in code that can be embedded in products and offerings and technologies around the world, so that it's not just a theoretical thing or a paper, but it's something we can start now quickly incorporating in products and offerings to allow people to take advantage of it. End game is the number of networks in the world start to reduce, theoretically, because now they can work together, right? And we like to call it the network effect.
So a lot of the new tokens, I guess they could, and new chains, they could probably adapt to this. But what about old ones?
You can adapt to it as well, right?
Okay. They need to roll out code changes, but right?
And let's not be mistaken here. This is not completely greenfield. There's a lot of great work to draw upon. The problem is the great work is bits and pieces. It's piecemealed around the industry. So we'd like to take some of the best ideas and bring them together under this framework. And that's why it's important. I think there are two key killer applications in blockchain. And we really have to think carefully about the standards behind them so that the world could work together, interoperate together. One is digital asset exchange. Some people call that payments, right? But it's interchange of value, and that's what this token initiative is doing. That's the first and most important thing. The second is, well, they're both equally important. The second important thing is digital identity. those are the two killer applications for blockchain. The token initiative is addressing trying to come up with a standardized view across token representation. And initiatives that we're not going to talk about in detail here today are around the Decentralized Identity Foundation, or DIF, that are coming up with standards like DIDs, decentralized identifiers, which become like the URLs of the digital world. Like URLs represent web pages and web assets, but what's your personal URL that represents your wallet or your wallets? What is this bell? Does this bell, it's an Internet of Things bell maybe? What is its identifier digitally? Right. And then how do we really attest that that really is a bell? Okay. Right? So these two things form the foundation for interoperability. And with interoperability, this question of, is there one network? Probably not. Right. Is there a million networks? Oh, please God, no. Some number in between. Okay. But the more we can standardize the notion of digital assets via tokens and identity, the world becomes a more unified place.
Very cool. Jerry, I think it's great stuff, and really appreciate your, that standardization. Do keep us up to date with what's going on. Is there any way anyone can follow along and participate in what you're
Yeah, just Google it. Okay. Google the things talking about the Enterprise Token Initiative. Check out what we're doing with Hyperledger, hyperledger.org, Hyperledger Fabric, and of course, my sponsor, IBM Blockchain.
Brilliant. Awesome stuff. Thanks so much, Jerry, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys, that's Jerry talking about the token, frameworks that's coming up with interoperability. We'll catch you guys. Yeah.
Love your energy.